People say, you are what you eat. I say, you are what you read.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
A lot of people talk about the news media. I talk about the news media and how it doesn't really help us in making better decisions about investing. Well, that's something we all talk about. Everybody beats up on the media right now in terms of what it fills your head with. But what about Facebook or cat videos or tweets? What are you filling your head with? It seems that we're getting a lot more research and information on the Facebook effect of how it actually can make you more depressed because you're looking at everybody else's version of their best self, right? And it can make people depressed. I've seen that even with my kids. Well, I think it goes that way with reading too. What you read on a consistent basis can really help form your beliefs. And then last week we were talking about upgrading our beliefs, and I think books are a wonderful way to upgrade our beliefs. So I'm going to share with you my reading list for 2018, and then we're going to answer some listener questions, and maybe you can share some of your list with us. Don't take advice from Roger Whitney unless you are a client. Think of this as helpful hints in education. And before you make any decisions, consult your legal advisor, tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Now let's go talk about books. So you are what you read. So let's talk about some things that we're going to read this year. So this is my reading list. And I will be honest with you. I'm not going to say typically. I've never put together an official reading list. I buy books by, not the dozens, but Lord, when someone recommends a good book to me, I'm out buying it. We've had a reading or a book episode a year or so ago, but it was about what we had read. So I want to talk about what we're going to read that we maybe haven't read before. Now, what I'm going to give you is not a complete list, but I want to share with you some of the books that I'm definitely going to read this year and my logic behind it. Okay, so the first one is financial related. Not many of them are. It's The Automatic Millionaire by David Bach. Now, I had never read this book and really didn't know anything about Mr. Bach until the FinCon conference where he was the keynote speaker. And then I went and I got a free copy of the book, and more than 1 million copies have been sold. And I believe some of you listeners have emailed me saying, hey, this is an awesome book. But I've never read it. I get the latte factor, which is one of his things, but I've never read about it or read him talk about it. So I'm going to read The Automatic Millionaire, a powerful one-step plan to live and finish rich. Man, it's a one-step plan. How much simpler could it be? So I'm excited to read that. And this is the anniversary edition, which is expanded and updated. Now, the second book I'm going to read, now this one is not near as exciting, is by the AARP and is called The Checklist for My Family, a guide to my history, financial plans, and final wishes by Sally Balch-Herm. The Checklist for My Family. So this is a publication by the AARP, which is basically almost a fill-in-the-blank checklist for, hey, this is what my financial plan is, this is what my financial wishes are, this is how things are organized, where everything is. So I'm reading this is work one related, obviously, to see if this is something I would recommend and maybe give to clients and work through it with them, or if there's something I can create using this as a basis. This is an important book. It sounds not very exciting, I'll be honest, but I have probably had 8 or 9 conversations this year with clients where the subject has been brought up. I feel the need to make sure things are in order so my spouse or my kids know where everything is and this can be handled easily. Now, we bring that up as a topic and quite often when we're executing the standard of care, but I'm getting people asking about that more and more. And it makes sense because I work with clients over 50 generally, and they're thinking about that. So I want to have and I think of that like a project, right? Okay, when that's a need, well, that's a short-term project that we just slowly have to work through together. So I want to make sure that we're covering all the bases by reading this amazingly exciting book, Checklist for Your Family. All right, next book is, now I've actually read this one before, but I haven't read it in a long time. It is Great by Choice. This is a classic business book by Jim Collins and what's the other name? Jim Collins is the one that's always out speaking, and Morton Henson. Uncertainty, Chaos, and Luck. Why Some Thrive Despite Them All. Now, this is a business book, but if you read this book with the eye of your life in financial management and making choices, everything applies. I've found that with most business books. If you read them, because this is the eye that I use, is helping people manage their financial life and make great choices. If you read most business books from that framework or perspective, you get it. And this is one of those books. So I've read this maybe 8 years ago, but I need to read this one again. So Great by Choice by Jim Collins. The third book on my reading list, and I don't say I'm ashamed to say, but this lady was on our podcast and we talked about this book. It's called The Mind Diet. And I skimmed it and I read a little bits of it, but I actually just put it away afterwards without executing on it. And it is The Mind Diet by Maggie Moon, a scientific approach to enhancing brain function and helping prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. And she's the real deal. And this book gives a little bit of the logic behind it, but what I really want to dive into are the recipes, so I can actually start eating a little healthier. I'm not going to give up my potato chips and French dip, though. I can't help myself. Well, I can help myself, but I don't want to. I love them. But anyway, I'm going to dive into that because I want to start cooking meals, which I don't normally do. Not unique meals, but I need some recipes, so I'm going to go back into that one. The next book, okay, I've read this one before, but not in a while, and it's a super quick read, so this will be an easy one to read. This one, you should definitely read if you've never read it. QBQ, The Question Behind the Question. What to really ask yourself to eliminate blame, victim thinking, complaining, and procrastination. Practicing personal accountability at work and life. Great book. Very, 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 very good book. A lot of the basis of agile retirement management. Intentionality. So this is a really quick read. Great book. I'm going to read it again. All right, next book. This is by Dan Rome. The Back of the Napkin. Solving Problems and Selling Ideas with Pictures. So I am in the communication business in a lot of ways, and in the teaching business with clients and with you, right? And I abuse analogies and metaphors. I mix them up. I overuse them. I don't care. I abuse them. I beat them senseless because I love them, because I think they help convey ideas, especially in this auditory way. And I used to noodle on a whiteboard back when nobody listened to my show and would post them on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And people actually love them. And so I stopped doing them. Don't ask why. So I'm going to start doing them again. And I want to learn how to communicate ideas and concepts via very simple drawing pictures, because I'm not an artist. So I'm going to read this book, The Back of the Napkin. Whether you're trying to communicate to your kids, to your spouse, to coworkers, this is a real simple book that I think can be very powerful in ways that you can't imagine. All right, the next book, this is one that I am digesting. This is my playbook, partly my playbook for the year. So this is not something you might have an interest in, but it's called The Advisor Playbook by Duncan McPherson and Chris Jepson. And we have a lot of systems and processes in our business. And that's basically what this book talks about. So this is an industry-specific book. But Nicole and I have a goal. The phrase we use is franchise ready. We want to have a very detailed playbook for how we run our business and how we serve our clients. And it's detailed now and well thought out, but we want to take it to a whole different level, and this book's going to help us. So, and then last Well, actually, I have a couple more, but this one is, I talked about it last week, Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt. I would highly recommend that book. So those are the books that I know I'm going to read this year. There's going to be a lot more, no doubt, but those are the ones that I have identified. Now I want to talk about the books that I reread each year. Just a few, but I think these are really good ones. The first one is by Henry Cloud, and the title is Necessary Endings: The Employees, the Businesses, and the Relationships That All of Us Have to Give Up in Order to Move Forward. This is a really powerful book, and I think it is very applicable for our stage of life. And we talked about this a little bit last week. So I reread this every year because it at least touches me in a personal way on the reasons and what it can do for us. And it also gives some strategies to help us do things that can be very difficult. So Necessary Endings is one that I reread every year. The second one, and I've talked about it before, but have yet to master this, is Essentialism by Greg McKeown, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And it is about what it sounds like it's about. It's about getting rid of the clutter, not just material clutter, but the things that we say yes to that we shouldn't say yes to, the obligations that we have that we really need to shed to focus on creating the life that we want. So that's the second book that I reread every year. The third book that I reread every year is The One Thing: The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. It's an amazing book. They have great graphics. I love their graphics. And I reread it every year because it helps focus on what we can do to create a great life and a great business. And it's usually not by doing more, but by doing less and focusing on one or two things. Now, I totally forgot the one new book that I'm reading this year, that the one I'm most excited about, and I've been reading it since January 1st, that I've recommended, probably the most recommended book by me in the last month or so, is The Daily Stoic. And it is a daily read. Each day you read less than a page, and there's a quote from a Stoic philosopher. I think I've quoted a few of them, and I've talked about this book, Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. And then a short little commentary below the quote. And I'm working really hard just to stay on each day and write a little bit of my experience with that thought each day. And I'm loving it. And I've recommended it to a few friends, and they've like, man, I love this. So it's basically about Stoicism, the philosophy. And I think it dovetails very well into agile retirement management. And I see it as a daily reminder of, hey, we control our perceptions and our choices. Everything else we need to learn to let go of because we can't control those things. I can't believe I almost forgot that one. That's the one I'm most excited about. All right, so that is my abbreviated reading list for 2018. I would love to learn about yours, and we'll talk about how to do that in the Smart Sprint. But for now, let's go talk to Nicole and see what she's reading and answer some of your questions. So welcome to the Practical Planning segment, and this is when we get to welcome Nicole. Hey, Nicole, how you doing?
Hey, Roger. I'm good.
So I want to hear a little bit about your reading list real quick. So tell me about the romantic novels you're going to be reading in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Do they all have Fabio on the front? Do they all have Fabio on the front?
Well, actually, right now, I am reading about super hot and steamy George Washington. I read Chernow's Alexander Hamilton last year, and so I am tackling his George Washington biography right now.
Oh, okay. How is it?
So far, it's good. I'm very early on in it. I realized George Washington's mom was kind of a rough lady. So
George Washington,
something new I've learned.
George Washington had a rough childhood.
He really did. The Washington men, by and large, all died young, too.
Really? How old was George when he died?
I think George was in his 50s, but his dad died young. His older brother died when he was 34. His grandfather died young, like in his 40s. I mean, it was a tough time back in the days of tuberculosis.
Now, one book I like that has George, it wasn't about George Washington, but it gave me more color to who he was the book 1776. That was
That is a really good one. It's been a while since I've read it.
That was the first book where George was more human and fallible than all the, the things we have in American culture about him.
Right.
All right. So we're going to make sure you add yours to the list that we'll be creating as a handout, your reading list of things you're excited about.
I don't actually have any romance novels, so I hope that's not too crushingly disappointing for you.
Anyway, so we have some questions though, right?
We do. And our first question is from Julie, who writes in, we are just about to enter retirement, and I'm hearing more and more rumblings about a melt-up. It sounds like a huge rise and then a crash. Something I read said that Japan's stock market did a melt-up, and when it fell back, it never recovered. What can you tell us about this?
Well, congratulations on getting ready to retire and have more time freedom. So this concept of a melt-up has been in the news a lot lately. In fact, I'm having a conversation with a client where he wants to discuss this as part of our agenda right after we record this. So what is a melt-up? So a melt-up, as defined by Investopedia, we'll use that definition, is a dramatic and unexpected improvement in the investment performance of an asset class. In this case, we're talking stocks, driven partly by a stampede of investors who don't want to miss out on its rise, rather than by fundamental improvements in the economy. So there are a lot of things baked into that, Julie, but you're entering retirement. So first off, I think you're in that hot zone, early retirement, entering retirement, where market drawdowns or falls in values can impact you much greater than most people for a couple reasons. One is you're about to turn off your major income sources, right? You are about to potentially draw from some of your investment assets, and your longevity during that period is the longest because you're at the beginning. That can be a toxic mix, and we've talked about that, because you don't have the income like a 20 or 34-year-old, Nicole, can. I just shared your age. Are you mad? You okay with that?
No.
Okay. No, you're not mad, or no, you're not okay?
No, I'm not mad.
Okay, cool. Nicole can ride these out because she's contributing rather than drawing money from it. So this is an important time early in retirement when you do want to err to the conservative side, because you don't want to have those big impacts. And this goes back to when we've talked about it, that minimum effective dose of risk in order to live the life that you want is, I think, super important to think about and dial in. So let me stress that. So let's get back to this melt-up idea. Markets have been on fire. They have been really hot for a while. And it's true that many people have not participated in this huge market run-up because everybody's waiting for the next shoe to drop. And we have been waiting for the next shoe to drop literally since the Great Recession in 2008. So there is an element of people, wow, I need to get in and participate in this. But, the idea of a melt-up assumes that it's a little bit irrational and isn't really based on fundamental improvements in the economy. But, we talked a little bit about this last week when we talked about being on your heels versus being on your toes. From an economic standpoint, the economy has been on its heels for a while in terms of corporate reinvestment in the country. And there have been some things that I think we are trying to grapple with, understanding how important they are, that have happened in the last 12 months. And this is not a political statement. This is just something to think about. One is we've had major tax reform, especially on the corporate side, that puts a lot of money in corporations and gives them more capital to potentially reinvest in growing businesses. Over the last 10 years, if you look at business reinvestment and capital expenditures, we've been waiting for it. It's felt like they haven't been reinvesting in their businesses and in the economy. They've sort of been sitting on their heels. And this tax reform is a big element that could potentially get them to start spending money on capital investments, hiring people, doing more R&D and things like that. We don't know how that's going to play out, whether they actually use the money for that. But that's a big change just in the last 12 months. The second big change that is really hard to quantify is the massive deregulation we've seen with this new president. The ease of doing business and the visibility of what the rules are going to be has become a lot clearer for a lot of businesses. And this is something that it's hard to quantify because it's an attitude. It's leaning on your feet rather than leaning on your heels. And I think the combination of tax reform and deregulation have hopefully put companies leaning forward to making plans and investing in the economy. I think that's part of what this might be. That said, it could not be, but there still could be pullbacks, right? And that's one reason why we just finished this market correction fire drill. Now is the time to ask a question like you're asking, Julie, and make sure that you're taking the appropriate amount of risk for really what you're trying to accomplish as a family, especially early in retirement, because we are way overdue, historically speaking, for a 10 to 15% correction in the markets. We've been overdue for the last 2 years. On average, we usually have one about every 18 months, and I think it's been 4 or 5 years now since we've had a normal 10 to 15% correction. So if we had one, it's not the end of the world. It's actually probably a really, really healthy thing. So it's a great question, Julie. This idea of a melt up makes, the premise of that is that this is a little irrational. And Japan is a very different type of country than we are. And their market hasn't really been that bad here recently. So I'd be very careful of trying to predict based on some of this headline news and really focus on what it is you're trying to accomplish and build your plan out from that perspective.
Our next question is from Jeff, who is writing in about Social Security. Jeff's wife is not eligible for Social Security survivor benefits because of her job. So Jeff is questioning whether he should go ahead and take Social Security at 62 because there's really no consideration of survivor benefit for his wife. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, Nicole, you left out the best part of his comment.
Which was...
Roger, thanks and keep up the great work. I love listening to your podcast.
Sorry about that.
Yes, we all need affirmation. Come on. All right, Jeff. So you're in a little bit of a unique situation, aren't you? Because you don't have this survivorship benefit that you're worrying about in this calculation. So let's think about it this way. Let's assume that your full retirement benefit at age 66 is $30,000 a year, about $2,500 a month. And if you take it at 62, you get about a 30% less benefit, which is $21,000 a year, about $1,750 a month. So what would be the break even from taking it at 62 to taking it at 65? Well, if I do the calculations here, let me do this. I'm going to do math live on air, Nicole. Let me go do that. Hold on a second.
Are you nervous?
Don't distract me. Okay, so the break even, if I did this correctly, and I think I did, is going to be about 75. Age 75 is where the break even point would be if you took it at 62 to taking it at 66, where taking it at 66 would start to pay you more benefit in a cumulative sense. That is not including COLA adjustments, right? Because Social Security increases every year by the amount of inflation, technically, or however they decide they want to calculate it. But I think it's averaged around 2.5% a year or something like that. So age 75 is going to be that break-even point. And then don't forget, if you take it early at age 62, there's an earnings test that gets applied to that $21,000 a year benefit. Basically, what happens is your benefits will be reduced by $1 for every $2 of earnings over roughly $17,000 a year. So if you plan on working in retirement, you're going to get a reduction in your benefits if you're earning over $17,000 a year. So that's something to consider. Now, that money isn't lost forever. What ends up happening is at age 66, full retirement age, they recalculate your benefit to give you that money that was lost in early retirement back. That's so confusing, but hey, it's the government. It's confusing. So what are some considerations in figuring this out? Well, one is, what are your other income sources early in retirement? Because that's going to have an impact of, if you take it early, but it ends up getting reduced by half until you get full retirement, then it may not make any sense because you have other income coming in. Another consideration of other income is, do you need the money to supplement your lifestyle? Is the choice take it early so you can preserve investment assets? That might be a consideration in there. It could be, and that will depend on your asset mix. Do you have after-tax assets that you would access to supplement your lifestyle if you didn't take Social Security. Well, that might be somewhat tax efficient. If it's all tax deferred money, then it's going to come out and be taxable income. So that might make more sense to take the Social Security early. And then what your actual spending goals are. You see how complicated this can be? It's not a simple math problem. Nicole's shaking her head. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of different nuances to get to the right decision. So it is really based on the life planning aspect to get to the right decision. But let's keep it simple here. The question is it worth taking at 62 a full retirement? As soon as you hit 75, it would make sense to wait, even without COLA. So your health is going to come into play. And your view of Social Security, I tend to view Social Security, at least with the clients that I work with, it's a very nice to have, but it is great longevity insurance in the sense that it increases with inflation and it's going to be that guaranteed source of income if you happen to live 90 to 100 or beyond, which seems crazy. I know it does, but last time I looked, a 60-year-old had a 50-50 chance of living past 90. And that's taking the entire population. That's not skewed to your particular health and everything else involved in that calculation. So the odds are pretty good, probably better than you realize, which would lead me to say to wait, but you definitely have to take in all those considerations.
Whew.
Social Security, I mean, anything with the government just gets real complicated.
Very complicated. Our next question is not quite as complicated math-wise, I don't think, but it could spark a theological debate. So this will be interesting.
Ooh.
This is from Thomas, and he writes in, and he wants to know how he can tithe from his investments. He says tithing from his paycheck is pretty straightforward, but he wants to know how he can tithe from his entire financial portfolio, including the earnings on his 401k, 529s, those kind of things. Any thoughts on how he could do that?
Well, if you're tithing on your gross income, then you're covering what you're contributing to 401ks and 529s, right? Because it's all pre-tax money that you're tithing on. I am not an expert. I need my buddy John on here to talk about tithing because he is a minister and I found Christ a little later in life and I will not be an expert on the Bible, although I have read it.
Well, I think there's even some debate at our church, at least. There's been debate on whether the tithe is pre-tax, post-tax, et cetera.
Right,
so
yeah. The clients that I know tithe, they typically do it on gross or pre-tax dollars, which covers all the contributions to things. So I think part of Thomas's question is, do I tithe on the earnings, right? So if I put in $10,000 into my 401k and it goes up to $12,000, do I have to include that in my tithe because I earned that $2,000? I'm not going to approach this from a religious aspect because I have no clue from that aspect. But I will say, I don't think you do. I don't think you do because it goes up and down. It's money that you've paid your tithe on, that you've invested, and that's going to move all over the place. Now, I guess if you wanted to get real technical with how you would do that, what you would do is when you start withdrawing from the money, you keep track of all your contributions and any gains once you're taking the money out, you could pay tithe on as it comes out, subtracting what you've already contributed. Or you could probably do some kind of estate plan to where, hey, I put in this amount into my 401k, let's say $100,000, and now when I die, it's worth $200,000, so I got to pay tithe on that extra $100,000. Personally, Thomas, I don't think you need to get it that complicated, and I think if you're tithing on your income, God is probably pretty happy.
Speaking of happy, is it time for us to get happy?
Yeah, I'm always happy, but let's do it.
Welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to live a happier life.
Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this, Nicole, but you know one thing I did a couple weeks ago?
You did mention it, so can I be a spoiler and just tell you?
Did I mention it on the show?
You deleted Facebook from your phone.
Did I mention it on the show?
No, you
or
didn't.
Just you? Okay, yeah. So a friend of mine, Dan Miller, shared a video about how scientifically diabolical social media is, the companies, in grabbing our attention. Now, not in some nefarious way. I'm trying to use all these cool words I like to say. Not in some nefarious way, but it's just scientific. They know how to get us to pay attention through notifications, through all sorts of things to keep our eyeballs, because that's the intent of any media, whether it's television or Facebook or Twitter, is to keep our attention because we are their product. So after seeing this video, I deleted all of my social media apps off of my phone. So Facebook or Twitter wouldn't let me know when something happened because I had developed the habit of responding. Oh, I got a notification. Who said what about me? Did they like my post? All those stupid things. Anyway, it's been a little uncomfortable at first because those random times when you're sitting at the elevator, when you're just sort of waiting for something, it's so easy. You look at people, they look down on their phones to just go browse what cat videos or dog videos are out there. So at first I found myself twiddling my thumbs. I felt really uncomfortable. What do I do? I was just standing here waiting for the elevator and I have to just sit here with myself. How uncomfortable. But I've actually come to enjoy it. And it relates to what we're talking about today, Nicole, because what I have been doing now is I got my Kindle on my phone and I'll read some of the book or whatever it is I'm reading. And I sort of like that because now when I'm browsing my phone or on my phone, I'm reading something I intentionally want to put in my head, not some random social media candy that doesn't do anything for me. And that's making me happy. I feel better about myself.
You should. That's awesome.
So let's go set a smart sprint so we can keep moving forward.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a 7-day goal to take a little baby step to create a better life. So this worked well. It was a year or two ago, we created our reading list and we had listeners give us books that they enjoyed. So I thought we'd flip that around this year, Nicole, and say, in the next 7 days, compile a list of great books that you want to read this year and be intentional about, hey, these are the things I want to be able to read. And then if you would be kind enough, send us an email and we'll compile the entire list in a handout, because this is something I've experienced, Nicole, and I know you have. Everybody that listens to the show, I bet you if we had everybody in one room, they would love each other.
I think so. We get a lot of emails from really nice people. And I feel like they know us from the show. So it's kind of cool.
So I think we sort of, the people that wouldn't like us probably don't listen anymore. And that's okay. But my point is, with this, most likely the books that you're going to put on your list are probably books I'm going to like, or Nicole's going to like, or somebody else is going to like. So we'll be able to have this huge library of books from people that are pretty much like us that we can use to compile and look towards the future. So if you do send us an email with your list, I'm thinking some categories. You got fiction and fun, which sometimes for some of us is hard to do. Investing, since this isn't a financial show. Happiness, personal growth, maybe a new skill or interest that you have. I would love to hear what your reading list is. And if you email it to us, we'll put this together. But regardless of that, I'd suggest you create in the next 7 days your reading list for yourself for 2018. Hey, Nicole, when someone leaves a review and sends it to me and says, hey, I read the Kindle, I really enjoyed the book, will you send me that free signed copy? They always say, if you have any books left. So maybe in 6-Shot Saturday, I'll show them how many books I have. So
you should take a picture and share it.
Do we have any books left?
We sure do. And we would love to hand them out to you.
And part of this is I paid for intentionally like 2,500 books from the publisher. And my intent is to give every one of those books away, including shipping, because I think the message is so important. So I want you to have one of them. And you would do me a favor by buying the Kindle and leaving an honest review. So it's a win-win. So yes, we have books left. So if you want one, buy the Kindle version or the Nook version, read it, leave an honest review, and let me know about it, and we will send one. We have one for you.
Until next week, this is the Retirement Answer Man sidekick.
And this is Roger Whitney. Have a great day.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.